Now on for Kellogg City Centre Cycling, which tonight comes from Bristol.
Welcome to Bristol, where tonight a large bank holiday crowd has gathered for round 3 in the Kellogg City Centre Cycling Championship. Well, the streets around the cathedral were closed to traffic just a short time ago. The riders came down onto the start line, and tonight they include one of the big stars from the last Tour de France, Frank Host of Belgium, the man who won the points championship, which made him the top sprinter on the Tour. And that also means that he's going to give quite a challenge tonight to the man alongside him, Alan Piper of Australia, who leads our own King of the Sprints competition. But tonight, of course, we've also got the continuation of the main championship, which lies at the moment between two English riders, Malcolm Elliott out in front and Phil Thomas, the defending champion. Malcolm, first of all, your impressions of this Bristol course?
Well, it's a very fast circuit, long straights, tight corners at the end of each. It's going to be a fast race tonight. It's a good crowd here. It's going to be a good race.
And how closely are you going to be keeping an eye on Phil Thomas here?
Very close. I think we'll both be watching each other just as much. But at the finish, it's going to be. We're just going to have to wait and see who goes first.
Right, Phil Thomas, do you think it's going to go as far as the finish with you and Malcolm? Because it's a bit tough at Bristol last year with you and Phil Anderson, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think last year's circuit was probably a lot tighter than tonight's circuit. You know, probably a little bit tougher circuit, I think, with the longer straights tonight and probably lesser corners. We'll probably see a bunch finish tonight, so we'll just have to see how it goes.
Yeah, but that incident with Phil at the end last year was a bit tough, wasn't it?
Bike racing's tough.
The message gets through to Malcolm, I'm sure. So quite a duel building up. Let's check on the main championship positions. It's Malcolm Elliott out in top position, leading by 2 points from Phil Thomas. And then a 5-point gap to Tony Doyle, who's absent tonight because he's competing out in Spain in the World Championships. Right, the course itself longer than last year, and the riders tackle it in the opposite direction, but it's still based around the Cathedral and College Green. And we can take a rider's eye look at it now with our commentator, Mick Bennett.
Hey, here we go. From this very picturesque start outside Bristol Cathedral, we're probably going to one of the most dangerous corners on the circuit tonight, which is this very sharp left-hander to come round the other side of College Green. The road's quite bumpy. We'll have to keep in tight to the cones here, get up as much speed as we can because it's slightly uphill here. Probably been able to change gear now. Top gear, out the saddle, keeping tight to the cones so that we can come into this fast left-hand turn now, into the fastest part of the circuit now, which is slightly downhill. Slightly downhill, but very, very bumpy again. Changing gear, getting up as much speed as we can, because the road starts to rise up very slightly, and this is probably the other most crucial corner on the circuit because riders will be lining themselves up here for the finishing straight, changing gear up into a smaller gear. The climb gets steeper towards the top, cutting the corner very tight. Top gear now, ready for the final sprint. Riders will be sorting themselves out just about this point. Into top gear, out the saddle, road dips slightly downhill, come up to the finishing line, to finish now.
And Mick Bennett now gets his breath back in the commentary box. Well, the race itself lasts approximately 55 minutes. I'll get out of the way, let round 3 of the Kellogg City Centre Cycling Championship get underway and hand you over to Phil Liggett.
And so the riders on the start line for the 3rd in the Kellogg's Championship Series. And what a race this one should prove to be, because Frank Host of Belgium is one of the world's fastest sprinters, and he proved that this year by winning 3 stages in the Tour de France before he walked away with the green jersey as winner of that 2,400 miles event on points. So all the riders on the line, without in fact Tony Doyle, Danny Clark and Gary Sutton this week, because all three are riding in Barcelona in the World Championships, and we wish them good luck there. So we'll know how they got on next week, but for the time being this race is now underway, and we'll be interested indeed to see how Frank Host and of course the Australian Alan Piper get on today. Well, the course here totally different from the course we used last year. The riders are going around in the opposite direction. We do go around and past the council chambers and the cathedral, but that's about the end of the similarities, because it's much longer. It's almost a kilometre, and this is possibly now the trickiest part of the course. Right flick, and although the cameras don't really show it, the riders climbing here quite severely, and then they'll make a sharp hairpin bend, and you see the gears being dropped there by Dave Miller from the rally team in the front. Comes around this very tight bend, and I think, Mick, this will be the crucial point as the race warms up.
Yes, indeed, Phil. And this circuit tonight is deceptively hard, actually. They're actually climbing here now, very slightly, but over the course of the next hour, you'll find that that slight rise will become an absolute mountain to them. As they hit the section there by the traffic lights, they start to come slightly downhill, very, very slightly, to hit this finish line now. And of course, we've got this very tight, very, very dangerous left-hand bend. We'll have to brake right down sharp, move right out to the cones and those bollards now, which is quite dangerous in itself.
Well, Dave Miller doing a good job here as team tactician for the TI Rally team tonight, because he's a teammate of the man in yellow, Malcolm Elliott. And the idea here to keep the pace high, try and stop the attack. Sid Barras in second place. Bob Downs moved up there into third spot. We haven't seen too much of Bob in these criteriums, but he is the winner this year of the Tour of Ireland, and a very good cyclist indeed. Former Commonwealth Games champion, and there he is in third place, adjusting his toe straps, tightening his feet in. The riders in the race here, in fact, they have plates underneath their shoes that clip onto the pedals, and then they tighten them in rather like one would if you were going skiing. And these quick release straps, of course, open up very quickly should the rider have the misfortune to fall.
Interesting to see Dave Miller on the front there, Phil. He's had pretty much of a mixed season. He's a first-year professional for him this year. Had a very serious accident in Belgium whilst he was out there racing earlier on in the year. Fractured his jaw in about 4 places, had it wired up for at least a month. Was on fluids for an equal amount of time. It's interesting to see him up there now today, trying to help Malcolm Elliott by keeping the pace high at the very front.
Sid Barras brings them around again, and the pocket rocket, Steve Jockey, the smallest man in the race there in white, in second place. He was unfortunate enough to collide with the car when warming up on this circuit this afternoon before it was closed to traffic, but he seems okay. I believe he's bruised a little bit down the right-hand side of his body, but showing no signs here. Coming through in second place, it looks as though Keith Lambert, in fact, is out in front, but I think Lambert is a lap behind, and that so early in the race will be allowed. Lambert quite clearly has had a mechanical problem, and he's allowed to take 1 lap out to cure the problem, but he must, of course, wait for the field.
Yeah, I think the problem there was caused by a back wheel that wasn't in securely enough, and as they started away, they tend to put a lot of effort into this start from the start-finish line into that first corner, and he actually pulled his wheel over, and which of course caused him not to be able to pedal for that first lap, so he's obviously pulled into the pits. I think they'll probably allow him that 1 lap, actually, Phil.
So Lambert comes back in at the front. Twice a former road racing champion, and once the Criterium champion. That's what they call circuit races in France, such as this Kellogg series. The riders warming up now to this championship, and what a close one it's turning out to be. 2 points only, remember, separate the 2 leaders of the championship, Malcolm Elliott and Phil Thomas. And just to remind you that the championship itself is decided with the first 10 riders at the end of the race scoring points, and the riders with the highest points head the table after each night. Well, the Falcon riders here, the teammate of Phil Thomas coming to the front, also anxious. There's a little bit of pushing and shoving going on in that corner there. I think it's a very difficult bend. It's very deceptive. It's almost a chicane, and the riders are having a job coping with it as they come through it. Mind you, the race is very early on. There's still a long way to go. And Elliott keeping out of trouble, riding about 10th or 12th in the line.
Interesting to see Neil Stevens, the young 20-year-old Australian there, the youngest professional in the field. He came over here from Melbourne at the early part of the year, rode in a 500-mile event, and I think it probably stunted his form for a certain part of the season, and now he's into these 1 hour very short circuit races. Nice to see him on the front there. Neil, a very gutsy rider, riding for ANC this year just for this 1984 season, goes back home in approximately a month's time.
Well, a professional cyclist is certainly a very versatile animal, Nick, because apart from riding these 1 hour races, of course, they could find themselves riding the Tour de France in the month of July as well. And that's a 22-day event, 2,500 miles. And the riders themselves probably pedalling in any 12 months of the year, perhaps 40,000 miles. An enormous total just riding a bike. Well, Alan Piper hits the front for the first time in that green jersey. He's the leader of the King of the Sprints competition, and there'll be 3 of those tonight towards the overall prize at the end of the series. Piper having built quite a lead at the moment. 1 or 2 cones being kicked away there, and a cone is loose in the road. But it seems the riders got away with that one, but that was a very dangerous situation indeed. Shane Sutton now attacks, seeing the situation there with the cone. Sutton goes clear, takes away his Australian countryman there. Piper follows him. Well, that's the first time we've seen the cones kicked into the path of the riders by the wheels of the cyclists, and that really could have been quite a dangerous situation, Mick.
Yes, it is indeed, but of course these corners are very tight, and when you have not only a tight but bumpy corner to contend with, you've also got this cone lane there, and sometimes you tend to forget as you come into it at over sometimes 35 miles an hour, you brake too sharply and sometimes skid into them. Obviously one of the riders had flicked a cone out on that side. It's no problem for yourself if you flicked it out, but you've got to always think of the riders behind you, Phil.
So Shane Sutton on the front, Piper in second place. So the whole field massing around. And Piper right in the thick of the action at the front.
Riders are already beginning to tail off towards that sharp left-hander, which is very deceptively hard. It's quite a rise in itself.
So the holder of the green jersey after 2 races, Alan Piper, is facing a strong challenge this week, not only from the British riders but from the winner of the Tour de France points classification, Frank Hoster. He'll have to bring all his sprinting skills into play if he's to beat the Belgian rider at his own game.
And stay out of trouble naturally, because everybody wants to be up the front. And as you come into the final straight or into the last corner, you've just got to make position, and the race can change so quickly. You have to read the race. There's no planned tactic because everybody is doing something different, so you just have to make the race as it goes.
But you can easily get left behind.
Well, sure you can. If you get stuck behind somebody's wheel, or somebody moves to the left or moves to the right, and you get caught and somebody else jumps on the left, well, then you're left behind for a start.
So there's Alan Piper, who arrived here quite late this afternoon because, would you believe, he was racing in Europe and then caught a very fast aeroplane indeed to arrive here in time for the race today.
And John O'Herity indeed, Phil, he pulled his foot out there, accelerating out of the corner. Obviously his feet aren't strapped in, but it's very hot here and very humid tonight, and your feet tend to sweat a tremendous amount.
And so the horn you can hear there is the first of the King of the Sprints. So next time around, the riders will receive 5 points, 3 points, 2 points and 1. First 4 riders over the line, and those points will be added to all the previous sprints of the 2 events we've already completed at Manchester and Nottingham. So the overall leader of this competition, wearing the green jersey, Alan Piper, and I think the hooter there caught Alan a little bit off guard, but he's on the wheel of Frank Hoster, Belgium, in that blue jersey with the yellow sleeves. Shane Sutton on the front, taking the field around the top bend. Steve Fleetwood in second place. Well, Piper has a lot to do here now, and I think he almost pushed Hoster off the wheel there of Ian Banbury to try and make some ground. In fact, Piper has done an amazing ride. He's come right to the front. Steve Fleetwood behind him, Hoster in second place, and look at the face of Frank Hoster, full of determination. Piper made a very bad gear change there, his legs locking up as he got out of the saddle. The crowd cheering on. Hoster goes on the right of the road, Piper on the left. So the former champion of Belgium trying for it, but washed out of it completely as Piper comes clear. Finds one more gear, still has chance to accelerate. That was a fine piece of riding by Alan Piper, because I would have said with half a lap to go, Mick, he had no chance at all of that win.
Indeed, especially when he had Steve Fleetwood, who's lying second overall, very, very close to him. His nerves must have been tremendously on edge there, which caused him to change gear, probably the wrong gear, but he salvaged a lot by winning that particular sprint.
So Alan Piper winning the first sprint here in Bristol and defending his position at the top of the sprints classification very well indeed, but still a very long way to go. We'll be back at Bristol in just a couple of minutes' time.
Green's black cherry cheesecake. Real fruit topping, a rich tangy filling, and a crunchy biscuit base. The perfect way to end a meal.
Welcome back to Bristol, round 3 of the Kellogg City Centre Cycling Championship. We've had the first sprint of the evening, won by Alan Piper. A check on the full result now. Alan Piper winning 5 points from him. Second place, Steve Fleetwood. Then Ian Banbury third, and Sid Barris in 4th position. But a lot is happening out there in the race. Let's rejoin Phil Liggett.
And indeed there is, Steve, because this is John Herity now, and while you were away there was an attack. John Herity has gone clear with the former champion of Belgium, Frank Hoster. You can see the gap. Just a few yards at the moment, 37 laps still to go in this championship tonight, and these two riders trying an attack.
Yes, Phil, they used that lull in the pace after the first king in the sprint. John Herity saw the opportunity when the front of the group eased off, put in this tremendous burst of speed. Frank Hoster went with him almost instantaneously, and we've got a situation now where the two of them are just slightly off the front, but Steve Jones is on the head of the bunch, protecting Malcolm Elliott's interests.
Well, it's very nice to see John Herity finding good form again. Another rider who's had an upset season with sickness one way and another, and he races for a French team. So John Herity, back in England, comes from Manchester, now joining forces with a man he knows very well in Frank Hoster, but the chase is on very much so. This is Phil Baton coming up, and Baton, the Staffordshire engine, is the first rider to cross the gap. So 36 laps to go, and Phil Baton joins the two leaders. And Stephen Roach comes up very, very quickly indeed, and Roach goes straight through. So as the two are caught, Roach has gone clear. Now this is the sort of tactic you would expect to see from a rider with the experience of Stephen Roach, who spends all his summer months living and racing in France. Roach has attacked immediately, and attack has been caught. So that's a good move, Mick.
Yes, he's seen the opportunity. What happens is, as the tempo goes up, some brakes are brought back. When the brakes are fetched back, everybody glances round, looks around, checks to see who's going to attack next. Stephen Roach saw them all glancing round and used the opportunity and launched this tremendous attack. Got a wonderful style there, very smooth peddler, doesn't use too big a gears, but a beautiful stylist.
I think there's a lot more at stake for Stephen Roach here tonight than just a victory in Bristol. And what's this? This is Steve Fleetwood in the pits here, so a lap out for Fleetwood. That's within the rules. He's had a mechanical problem, and it looks as though he's having a tough time too. The perspiration running off his face here. Once again for these series, it's another hot, humid night.
Got the arm of
sorry, Mick. Steve Fleetwood, I was about to say, is having a happy night here, but he's back in the race very short, I think.
Yes, he had the pits referee's arm restraining him there. He must go in as soon as the bunch come round again. He can't go in before they come round.
Well, Roach, meanwhile, keeps on out in front. He broke clear with 32 laps to go, and he's been clear now for something like 3 laps of the circuit measuring 0.6 of a mile. So Roach is making headway now. It's been a very mixed year, in fact, for Stephen Roach. He started the Tour de France among the favourites, and then a crash followed by sickness left him feeling he was lucky to finish the race at all. Now preparation for Sunday's World Championship in Spain, and another setback.
Well, I just come from the Tour de Limousine in Limoges in France, which is a 4-day stage race. But after 3 stages, I had to stop because I got bitten by some kind of a bug, and I had a bit of rash on my hands and everything, and my fingers are a bit swollen, like. So I meant I had to stop, and on Saturday night I had to stop. I was lying in 3rd place, holding the mountain jersey, but I had to stop. So the form is good, but don't know whether tonight will be good or not.
No, all smiles there now for Stephen Roach, because he was saying before the race began he was very, very concerned about his form. It's been a very mixed season indeed. One day he's been winning and the next day he's been feeling quite ill. But now, once again, he's on the attack, and I think trying to prove to himself more than anybody now that he's capable of going to Barcelona this week and doing a good performance in the World Championship. Wouldn't that be so, Mick?
It's certainly showing that he's got the form at the right time, and it must be good for his morale to see him going off the front. And he's obviously prepared very, very hard for the World Championships, and the form that he's got for the World Road title is showing here as well, because he's very smooth. I've never seen Stephen Roach looking quite as smooth as this, changing up to his gears. Very intelligent rider, uses the right moments in the race to attack. When he's off the front like this on his own, it's much safer as well. He can pick his own line going into the various corners and his own part of the road. He knows the sort of gear. If he can sustain this for another 2 or 3 laps, he should get into the sort of rhythm that will enable him to open the gap up.
Well, Roach is certainly finding the form at the moment, because the last lap time was a record at 29.58 miles, 589 miles per hour, and that really is a marvellous time. 1 minute and 13 seconds to get round this kilometre circuit here in the city centre of Bristol. An enormous crowd, bigger I think than we had here last year, when of course it was Phil Thomas in that great battle with the Australian Phil Anderson who came out on top and took the lead in the series, and finally he ran out then as the champion of the Kellogg's events. But now Roach on the attack. The counter-attacks all the time being shared equally, I think, Mick, between the Falcon team and the Wyman team of Malcolm Elliott.
Yes, the Rally Wyman team are doing quite a job tonight for Malcolm. He's in yellow. He's carried the yellow jersey from the first event at Manchester. Steve Jones is probably the man on form, the man that they call Malcolm Elliott's lieutenant. He's always there protecting Malcolm Elliott's interests. On tight circuits like this, Phil, the only place you can really recover after an effort is as you brake coming into the bend. You've got a split second of recovery time, and that's what they try and utilise as much as possible.
Well, at the moment, these 2 Falcon riders on the front are Sid Barras and Keith Lambert, and I hope they'll forgive me if I say they are 2 of the oldest riders in the race, but they really are also 2 of the greatest combatants. They work very, very hard, working of course in favour of Phil Thomas at the moment, because he's the rider they hope will come good in the finishing sprint and come and win 10 points. Just to remind you of the scoring system in the championship, each Monday evening, and there's still 3 more to come, the first 10 riders to finish receive 10 points for the win, down to 1 point for 10th place. And the overall situation before we started tonight, Malcolm Elliott was leading by 2 clear points from Phil Thomas of the Falcon team.
This Falcon team do a tremendous job for Phil Thomas. They're there, they know that if somebody gets away, they'll take maximum points off Phil Thomas, and Phil Thomas needs 2 points to come to draw level with Malcolm Elliott, so they're trying to nip every attack in the bud at the moment. And Keith Lambert is one of the ideal men to do this, because he's so strong when he gets on the front. He uses these long straights to get that big gear winding, and I think, Phil, they're going to pull Stephen Roach back.
Well, if they do, it's going to be all down to the effort of Keith Lambert, because he's cracking the field here. Daylight is forming between the groups, and Lambert is causing all the problems. His face a picture of agony. He's chasing Stephen Roach, and what a ride this boy from Dublin is doing, because he's been out in front now for 7 laps, and to average 29 miles an hour on what is really, Mick, a very difficult course. You've been round it once yourself. You sounded a bit out of breath tonight when you came in, by the way.
Yes, I was indeed. I think I misjudged my pace a little there. The road surface as well down the back, this section that we're seeing prior to this left-hand short, sharp climb here as Stephen approaches it, is quite bumpy, and it upsets the rhythm. You like to get into a big gear that Stephen's using now out of this corner, and when you settle down in it, you can spell out this rhythm to your own mind, and you get into a good tempo, and you maintain these very high speeds on these bicycles. If the road is very bumpy, it breaks up the whole rhythm of your ride, and therefore interrupts your speed.
Well, I think the end is in sight for Roach, but the crowd enjoying this enormously. Roach has been away from 32 laps to go. We're now coming up to 25 laps to go, so 7 laps in the front for Roach. But I think he's beginning to lose his rhythm here. He cornered very wide there indeed. And all the damage being done by the Rally Wyman team. It looks like Steve Jones at the front now, trailed by Sean Yates, and teammate of Alan Piper.
Stephen there, I think he's going to resign himself to being caught, because the whole tempo of the chasing bunch has increased somewhat, with Steve Jones recovering whilst the Falcon team did their bit. He's now moved to the front to do his bit for Malcolm Elliott, and Stephen Roach glancing between his arms there. Sometimes when you do that, you look between your arms, you can see the bunch chasing behind. Yes, and Stephen's glanced over his left shoulder there. I think he's going to ease back and wait for another ideal opportunity to attack.
So what has been the longest attack I think we've seen of the whole series so far. We didn't get too many riders successful in breaking clear at either Manchester or Nottingham. Roach has done it here, but it seems only for a short while. Once a rider begins to glance over his shoulder, I think that they've already sensed the pack are coming up on them, and indeed they are. Sid Barrows first around the corner, Phil Baton second, Keith Lambert third, Alan Piper, that green jersey, in fourth place, then Sean Yates. There goes Frank Host of Belgium. So still the rider who won 3 stages in the Tour de France in the action all the time. And a word of warning, I think, there from Barrows. The finger was pointing quite clearly at Phil Baton. Well, Sid has missed the boat because Baton has gone. So Phil Baton attacks with 24 laps to go, and all the field are in pursuit.
Phil Baton's used a classic move there. Stephen Roach has been caught back there, and Phil Baton's used it again to launch an attack, bringing the whole tempo of the race up there. But ever vigilant Keith Lambert's there, keeping Phil Baton, and Alan Piper now has gone with him. That's a dangerous move, because we've got Alan Piper leading the points competition, and they can't let him get too far away.
Well, this is a very, very good move, and I would have expected the yellow jersey of Malcolm Elliott to have been at or near the front of the chasing group now, because Baton is most certainly a danger in this series. The only thing that Phil Baton lacks in a complete cyclist is a fast sprint finish, but if he gets clear, then he has every chance of winning from just a small group.
And this is where he gets very tactical as well, because you've got Keith Lambert, the Falcon rider. Phil Thomas is way back in the back group there. He can't work with Phil Baton and encourage this move to go away, because he knows that Phil Thomas has to get maximum points. And once again we have Steve Jones on the front of the chasing group, with Frank Hoster, the Belgian rider, in close attendance also.
Well, we're following the chasers through here, and I don't see any sign at all here, Mick, of the yellow jersey of Malcolm Elliott. There are 3 Falcon riders in that group, so it could be that Phil Thomas is not here too. There's the second group goes through. Still no yellow jersey. Now, what is going on? A long, long gap. The field has been totally split by this attack from Phil Baton. And there's the yellow jersey. So Malcolm Elliott comes through, and it looks to me as though Phil Thomas is riding in second place behind the yellow jersey. So what on earth is going on? Because the 2 riders who are leading this championship overall, remember that Elliott has 19 points and Phil Thomas has 17, and neither of them seem interested in the race tonight. Now, what do you make of that, Mick?
Well, I certainly don't know. They've put themselves into this position. Malcolm Elliott obviously doesn't want to do too much chasing, and Phil Thomas has said, you're the yellow jersey holder, it's all up to you, you've got to take the race to me, I'm just protecting my own interests. Interestingly enough, we've also got Steve Fleetwood there, who's lying second in the sprints king of the sprints competition. He really shouldn't be in that position. He must be up there marking Alan Piper. But this position here is quite unique, because none of them seem to want to do any work at all.
Well, just to complete the record books here, the other 2 riders in this group appear to be John Wainwright and Mick Morrison, but I can only assume that Thomas will refuse to assist Elliott, and Elliott has done likewise to Phil Thomas, and as a result, both riders have lost contact with the main field, because this rivalry has been developing now through the last 2 races. Remember that Malcolm Elliott has had a second and a win in the last 2 events, and Thomas hasn't been too far behind. He was third in the first event at Manchester, and was of course the champion of the series last year. This is Alan Piper on the front now, and he may well have had word that the yellow jersey is off the back of the group, because he really is piling on the pressure at the front now.
I've never seen a rider that can pull so many faces like Alan Piper. When he's under effort, he's a beautiful stylist, but my word, the faces he pulls and screws himself up in agony there. Notably, Keith Lambert has refused to go to the front throughout the whole time this break's been away. So we just have Alan Piper, Keith Lambert the passenger, and Phil Bain who's another engine.
Well, Lambert, of course, as you rightly say, will assist this break not at all, because he may not even know that Phil Thomas is off the back of the group. The main field is regrouped, but the yellow jersey is still behind. The latest time check we have, in fact, are that the group of 5 riders is 25 seconds behind the main field. Now remember, it's 1 minute and about 10 seconds to lap the field, and to lap the circuit rather, and if the leaders do happen to catch up with the yellow jersey, then he will be eliminated from the event tonight. And I really could never have thought that possible before the evening began. Tony James on the front now. And Baton has gone clear of the 2 leaders, so Phil Baton has gone clear on his own now.
Putting his head down, sticking his jaw out there is typical of Phil Baton's style. He loves this front position, changing gear there, glancing under his arm to see if the field are chasing. We should well see him there out on the front, grimacing all over his face. There's spit right down the side of his chin there. He's gasping for air because it's very, very hot and very humid out there, and there's very little oxygen to get down, Phil.
Well, Phil Baton was telling me earlier he has finished 3rd in races throughout Britain this year on no fewer than 18 occasions this year. So it would be nice to see him win one, and now Baton goes clear. Baton on his own, and if they can give him his head, then he will take everything he can possibly get, because Baton is a danger man. Tony James comes round, followed by Roach. Yates then. Frank Host behind Yates. The big Belgian yet to make a move. We haven't seen too much of him. He made that early break with John Herity. Now he seems to have paid the price, hiding in the comfort. I say that very likely in the main field, because remember, tonight the speed is up around 29.5 miles an hour. Baton checks his position.
Phil Baton must know that there's that group off the back containing the yellow jersey and Paul Thomas. So he's desperately trying to keep this tempo up as long as he can, so that it'll split even more. Indeed, it's splintered behind him. There must be managers having heart attacks in the pits at the moment, because the signals going out all over the place. The Falcon riders have spread themselves out down the field. They don't know what on earth to do. Phil Thomas is stuck way at the back there with Malcolm Elliott, and they're just totally at a loss as what to do now.
Well, there we can see the gap, and there's still no sign of these 5 riders that are chasing. And I would estimate now they are almost, here they come. There must almost be a third of a lap behind the leader on the road, which is Phil Baton. Thomas, in fact, is waving to the riders to come around him. He doesn't seem at all interested in taking up the pace. Here are the 2 leaders, and Stephen Roach has joined Baton now. So Roach again has chose a strong man, come out of that main field, and now once more trying to break clear. Roach on the front, Baton in 2nd place. And is this Sean Yates? And I think it is, trying to cross the gap. And if Yates does get across, Mick, that would be a tremendously strong group.
It's Ian Banbury, Phil, of the Modusal team that's just joined Phil Baton and Stephen Roach there. That's a very good combination.
So Ian Banbury, who in the days of Mick Bennett, when he was a cyclist, they shared a bronze medal in the Olympic Games together. Roach on the front, and Yates has now joined the leaders, so Sean Yates has now taken his chance. Yates attacks as they all come together again. This is a tremendous race tonight. Nobody giving any quarter. None asked for, none given. Yates goes clear. 2 laps to go now to the next in the King of the Sprints. Remember, 5, 3, 2 and 1 is the scoring system for the King of the Sprints. And Yates off in pursuit of 5 points.
I certainly wouldn't like to be the bicycle of Sean Yates, because he's such a strong fellow. They call him the Animal, that's his nickname amongst the pros. Been known to eat as many as 15 Mars bars before one of these competitions. But he pulls and pushes that bicycle all over the place. I've known him to go through as many as 6, 7 bicycles in the short time of one season, Phil.
Well, he could be in a hurry, Mick, because in fact he's catching a plane to Barcelona, where he's hoping to qualify in the World 5,000 metres Pursuit Championships this week. By the way, you can watch the World Cycling Championships on ITV's World of Sport on Saturday and see how these riders get on. Missing from the lineup today, Danny Clark and Gary Sutton, because they are already out in Barcelona with Tony Doyle. And this is the face of Sean Yates, who, by the look of it, Mick, I think he wishes he was already there.
He's pulling and pushing that bicycle. He's sucking and blowing in air all over the place, Phil. He's really under extreme effort now. I think he's going to resign himself to let the field catch him, because I think he's timed it just at the wrong moment there. The whole bunch are going to increase their tempo for this sprint lap, and it's a bad time for Sean to actually attack there. Stephen Roach is coming up closely behind him, and Stephen is going to decide when he gets onto him whether to continue working hard with Sean.
Well, I don't think Roach has missed a move of importance tonight. He's been in the action right from the word go, and again he's recognised a strong man. He's joined Yates, and that, I think, is the sort of help that Yates will be delighted to receive, because it looked as though Yates was about to be caught. But now the gap is beginning to open again, because Roach has added fuel to the fire. Yates recovers, comes back to the front, picks up the tempo again. Remember the sprint this time round for the king of the sprints. 5 points and 3 points here on the front. Alan Piper at the head of the field will look for at least 2 points, possibly only 1.
Nobody wants to bridge that gap to Stephen and Sean Yates, because it's getting in between, in no man's land between a break and the bunch. Is a very difficult place to be, because you have to give it total commitment to making your effort, and a lot of them are very reluctant. So the quicker Sean and Stephen can settle down to this high tempo and a good rhythm together, the better it'll be for them.
Well, the sprint goes through, and that's another fine scoring point, because Piper was there in 3rd place.
So after the second sprint, I've got in the pits with me Bernard Taylor, manager of the Falcon team. The position of Phil Thomas and Malcolm Elliott at the back there.
Well, it's a bit of a tactical situation at the moment. Malcolm is obviously sitting on Phil because they're so close on points, and Phil has switched the situation at the moment so that he's sitting on Malcolm and making Malcolm do some work. Obviously, if they get lapped, then they'll both be pulled out. But the winner tonight will get a bit closer to Malcolm Elliott on points, and Malcolm will have to look after 2 riders then instead of 1. The situation, I don't like to see one of our riders off the back, obviously, but the situation is tactical, and I don't think Malcolm will do any work now, and they'll probably get lapped.
OK, Bernard, many thanks.
Thank you.
Almost a night off for you then.
Nearly, yes.
OK, we'll turn our attention back to the front of the pack in a couple of minutes' time, the climax of this 3rd round of the Kellogg City Centre Championship.
Take a walk down any street.
Because the splendid riding by Stephen Roach and Sean Yates is bringing an early shower for the yellow jersey in this Kellogg's Championship. Malcolm Elliott on the front looked over his shoulder. He saw the 2 leaders coming right round behind him, and this means that these 2 riders have gained almost a kilometre over the top 2 riders so far in the Kellogg's Championships, and immediately they contact the back of the string, which they've done. This group of 5 riders will be eliminated from the championship tonight. So they'll have to come back and fight again next week in Cardiff, but there'll be no points at all for the yellow jersey nor Phil Thomas. Mick, what can you say about that?
I should think there'll be some very heated discussion between the managers of Malcolm Elliott and Phil Thomas tonight in the dressing rooms. I certainly wouldn't like to be in their shoes. I don't think there's any love lost between Phil Thomas and Malcolm Elliott. They've had a history of being at one another in these very fast finishes all the time, because they're both equally fast riders. At the moment, Malcolm Elliott's probably got the slight edge on Phil Thomas, and so Phil Thomas was out to show that he could stay with Malcolm Elliott and blunt Malcolm Elliott's sprint finish and probably gain a few more points. But in this position, neither of them have gained any more points, so it's status quo at the moment.
Well, Malcolm Elliott and Phil Thomas are now going to watch this race from the pits, and who would have thought that at the start of the 3rd championship tonight? Those riders separated by 2 points, and it's fair to say that they're not in a position of being overhauled tonight. Whoever wins this race and gains 10 points, they couldn't catch up with the total of either Phil Thomas or Malcolm Elliott, but the gap certainly will close, and we can see now the referees there were pulling the riders off the course, so they are out, and there's no doubt about that tonight. But look at the gap forming here now, and it's being formed by the tremendous tandem here of Stephen Roach and Sean Yates, rivals in teams, but choosing now to work together to beat the common enemy, the main field behind, and the gap is opening all the time.
And catching Malcolm Elliott and Phil Thomas must have certainly pushed a lot more adrenaline through the veins of Stephen Roach and Sean Yates there, because they haven't eased off at all. They're still attacking the gear, attacking the corners, fighting every inch of the way around this kilometre circuit.
So the two riders still going clear now. Roach is on the front, his face telling it all. Yates, a picture of concentration now behind. Drop of the gears there as they go round and out of our sight once again.
Malcolm Elliott in the pits, the first time a yellow jersey wearer has been eliminated in the competition. How did it happen?
Well, it's just one of those things that happens from time to time. You get two riders, both very stubborn. What happened, Phil let the gap open and I wasn't prepared to close it. And in the end, the race was lost, but I thought, well, we've come here to race, we've come here to please the crowd, and I just kept it going on the front. And I've got a bit of pride. I didn't want to just let it go altogether. I felt I've got an obligation to uphold,
Phil Thomas with us here. Do you feel any obligation for the way it happened, as Malcolm suggests that?
None whatsoever. Tough at the top, he's got the yellow jersey.
Yeah.
I won't help him at all. It's as simple as that.
So what does it do to the championship prospects of both of you now?
I don't know.
We'll have to wait and see the result. But as it at the moment, it could probably just freeze the overall positions, and that's all right by me.
But it could throw the whole thing wide open and make tonight's finish particularly interesting. We'll get back to that. Sorry to see you both in the pits.
And so with 2 laps to go to the next king of the sprint, and 2 riders still very much clear now. And there we have the result after sprint 2 tonight. The overall standing is Stephen Roach with 5 points, Sean Yates 3 points, Wakefield of England 2, and Alan Piper gets 1 in 4th place. And the king of the sprints after the second sprint tonight, overall situation, Alan Piper of Australia has 6, and Stephen Roach of Ireland with 5, and then come a number of riders equal on points.
Interesting to see how Stephen Roach and Sean Yates are sharing the amount of work they're doing here. It looks to me as if they're doing 1 lap of the circuit on the front each, allowing the rider that's sitting behind you to recover for that lap whilst you're on the front. You're riding in the slipstream of the leading rider and being able to recover and recoup your reserves when you have to move to the front position.
Well, this large crowd in the city centre of Bristol, roads all completely closed to traffic. It's been quite a fun day in the city of Bristol today. A lot of fun in the watershed and in the harbour here, and now a lot of fun and games around the city centre itself on the road. And Roach and Yates are doing all the entertaining. This enormous crowd enjoying it. Look at the gap now. 1 lap to go to the final sprint of the night. And Alan Piper really could do with doing something about these 2 riders out in front, because he has quite a good lead overall in the series since he's led this series since Manchester, where the Kellogg's Championships began 2 weeks ago. This is the 3rd race. Remember, there are 6 of them. Next week we're in Cardiff, then we go to Birmingham, and finally the race ends in Glasgow.
Interesting to see these side-on shots of the riders. You can tell the amount of effort they're putting in, because they pull themselves right forward on the saddle. Normally when you're in a casual riding position on a bicycle, you're sitting central to the back of the saddle, but as they go into this tremendous effort, they pull themselves right forward, because your arms get tired and your legs get also very tired, and you find yourself having to push yourself back in the saddle to correct your position.
So out of our sight go the 2 leaders. The main field are chasing all the time, of course, but the gap to me appears to be opening. Yates comes through, Roach in 2nd place, but these 2 riders are still sharing the pace together. An enormous gap now as we look right along Deanery Road, and then the pack come into sight. And Piper is on the attack. Piper goes clear. He'll take 3rd place in the sprint. That will be 2 very useful points for the overall leader, Alan Piper.
tremendously gutsy rider is Alan Piper. He came here tonight at Bristol and he said, I want that yellow jersey, and he's determined to go out and get it. Not only is he a little bit greedy at the moment because he's also leading the King of the Sprints competition, but he's not determined to sit back there and watch Stephen Roach and Sean Yates grab all the glory, so he's decided to launch himself off the front. Be interesting to see if the bunch are going to chase him at the moment.
There's confirmation of sprint number 3 tonight. Sean Yates takes the 5 points this time. Stephen Roach is second. Alan Piper takes 2 valuable points. And Mike Williams slips in there with 1 point for 4th spot. The overall situation tonight, Sean Yates, Stephen Roach and Alan Piper share 8 points each. Steve Fleetwood is 4th with 3 points. And the gap now absolutely enormous. These 2 riders are well out of sight, but Alan Piper is holding on to an advantage here over the field. It's quite clear now, Mick, that Piper wasn't just going for the sprints, he's going for the race.
He certainly wants the lot tonight, Phil. He's such a hungry rider. He rode yesterday in Belgium, and I think he finished in the first 3 in Belgium, so he's a rider again preparing for the World Championships in Barcelona later this week, and he's obviously got the form and he's carrying it through to this Kellogg's Championships.
Well, Piper's only 24 years of age. He has a sparkling career ahead of him. He finished his first Tour de France this year, finished it extremely strongly, and in fact on the first 2 stages he had 2 third places. So Piper, a mature professional already, and now trying to catch on to the tandem at the front of Roach and Yates.
And this pair just aren't easing off at all, and neither is Alan Piper. He's changing gear there, glancing to see the gap, gets out the saddle, picks his rhythm up again, changes gear again, moves into this tight left-hand corner and using every ounce of energy to accelerate out of that corner. Sean Yates checking behind him there to see how close Alan Piper is. He knows that if they ease off for the slightest moment, Alan Piper's going to pounce right on their backs.
Well, this is quite a predicament, really, for Sean Yates, because he's a member of the same Peugeot team as Alan Piper, and they're also extremely good friends where they live in France. Now, I would have thought, Mick, that Yates will not contribute quite so much now to this leading group.
Quite possibly. He's probably had the message from his pitch that Alan Piper's out on front of the bunch, and it's also an excuse for him to probably ease off a little bit of the tempo on the front with Stephen Roach. Stephen Roach has obviously got no interest in a Peugeot rider chasing. He knows he's got to keep the tempo, because if Alan Piper catches the pair of them, it's 2 Peugeots against 1 La Redoute rider, and that's a position he doesn't want to be in at the moment. But my money's on Sean Yates tonight to win that sprint, because it's a right long gallop there. It's a slightly uphill. Sean Yates loves these big gear sprints.
Well, Stephen Roach, I know he hasn't been at all happy in the finishes at Manchester or Nottingham, because they were too rough for him. Mass sprint finishes are not Stephen Roach's cup of tea at all. And in fact, last Monday at Nottingham, he crashed with 2 laps to go and was lucky to stay upright. He held on to the barriers and didn't even finish the race. So the answer was attack and go for it. He's doing that now. But Piper is gaining all the time over the 2 leaders and pulling away quite clearly now from the field. And the crowd here are appreciating every minute of this attack by the Australian and are cheering him all the way around the circuit. Here we have his teammate at the front, Sean Yates. Roach now riding in his slipstream.
And even though Sean Yates has had the message from the pitch, which I'm sure he has, he's thought to himself, well, if Alan Piper's going to catch us, he's going to have to work damn hard for it, because I'm going to win this one tonight.
Well, I don't think you can take that away from Sean Yates. He comes from Forest Row in Sussex, but he's chosen, like a number of British riders, to make his living in Europe. He's managed to earn a top contract with a top professional team in France, and as a result, he too rode his first ever Tour de France this year and finished it. But the chase is dramatic now, because Piper is closing inch by inch, and these last couple of laps, Mick, are going to be very, very much touch and go.
Yes, as Stephen Roach moves up into his gears there. Nice to see Sean Yates, because he's normally a worker for this large Peugeot team that's domiciled in France. Sean is a worker for the team, normally working for the likes of Alan Piper, who's one of the star riders in the team, so it's nice to see the boot on the other foot tonight.
Well, into the last snap now, and Roach must be asking himself some questions now. Can he take on Sean Yates? Can he afford to finesse and perhaps wait a little bit? He's tightening both feet even tighter into those plates, so he can pull as well as push in the sprint on those pedals. Riding very close to the cones, forcing Yates, should he attack him, to go on one side only. And that would be on Roach's left side. And look at the figure of Piper. You can just see him coming down, but it's too late. The chase is not going to be successful for Piper. Perhaps one more lap would have done it. Roach breathing deeply, rests what I think is an aching back here. But he comes into the finishing straight now, slows down a little bit. Piper will continue to gain, but he won't gain enough now. This has been a great race tonight. The laps have been run off at around 30 miles an hour. Stephen Roach hasn't missed a move, but on the right goes Sean Yates now. Roach is taking him on. What a sprint this is. Yates is going now. Half a length in it. Yates takes it on the line. Quite clear in the finish. Stephen Roach takes second place. The crowd reserving a special cheer for Alan Piper of Australia. And the sprint here for fourth place being won by Steve Jockey. But this picture says it all. Two men who made friends for the night. They beat the field in the Kellogg's Championship. And we can see now Yates is happy to wave to the crowd. We don't see him win many races in Great Britain. And here we can see how he did it, because Yates won by a good half length.
Steve Roach, Sean Yates, congratulations on a marvellous race. Exactly how tough was it, though?
For me, it wasn't too tough because I was going well. I had a good partner with me, Stephen Roach, and we worked well together. It was a good circuit for staying away, I think. Not too hard, not too twisty. And I was quite pleased with my performance.
How did you actually work together over those last few laps, Steve?
Well, on the continent we call Sean the captain, so I just let him play the captain and did what he told me. So we just kept riding together, like, and riding eyeballs out. We said, well, we'll see what happens in the finish. Yeah. But like, I know myself that Sean's a faster sprinter than myself. And as I told you earlier on, for myself the form isn't really too good. But when I saw Sean going, I said, well, it's a good move, so that's the good move to be in.
So there we have an enormous crowd seeing the award tonight, and the final result in Bristol this evening. Sean Yates, a win, takes 10 points in the championship. Stephen Roach was second, Alan Piper third, Steve Jockey takes 7 in fourth place. And now the overall situation, Malcolm Elliott